Hi everyone, I'm Rolanda. In June 2025, I had to have emergency open heart surgery. Before June 2025, I didn't know that heart disease was the leading cause of death in America. I didn't know that women were leading that charge in deaths. At the age of 42, it never really crossed my mind that the symptoms that I was experiencing were that bad. I want to start from the beginning. In 2024, I was preparing for my retirement. 23 years in the Army. I was excited, right? After 23 years, who wouldn't be excited, right? But as I was doing all of my out processing, we do a exiting physical. And it was discovered during my exiting physical that I was having a high rate of premature ventricular contractions, PVCs. I want you to put a pin in that. I was having PVCs, and the burden was about 20%, which definitely, caused for more testing to figure out what was going on, okay? So I'm exiting the military. I'm moving from Texas to Georgia. So it's a lot of stuff happening. I get to Georgia and start getting all of the testing and everything done to discover what's going on with the PVCs. So with that, all of the million dollar testings are done. MRI of my heart, CT scans with contrast, all the things. CT scans came back, no blockage, okay? MRI of the heart, structurally, heart as well, no major issues. But the PVCs continued. Even with medication, it wasn't really helping the PVCs. And what the doctors was noticing from my MRI was that because of the PVCs were so frequent, the possibility of it causing damage to my heart was increasing because the PVCs were not budging, okay? So they sent me to a doctor who deals with the electrical part of the heart. And that's when we started to look into, well, maybe you need to have an ablation to stop the PVCs, okay? So I see a doctor. At first he was like, no, we don't need to do the surgery, the ablation. And then as time progressed, he's like, okay, maybe we do because the PVCs aren't being controlled. They're increasing, okay? Now, mind you, we never really got to the root cause of why I was having PVCs to begin with, right? They ask you your family history and whatnot. There was no real concern there that's related. So we kind of moved on. Soon after, we set up the appointment to have the ablation. The ablation went well, right? PVCs stopped. I'm like, okay, I'm good, right? PVCs have stopped. The operation went well, no issues. But soon after the operation, I would say within maybe 2 weeks, I started having chest pain. And what's interesting is before the ablation, like I never had any chest pain. So this was new. This was a new symptom. I will note that one of the symptoms that I was having, even when I was in Texas before it was acknowledged that I was having PVCs, was that I was experiencing like fatigue, like more fatigue than normal. And for me, being in the military, it's like I feel like I've always felt I was tired. So to feel tired wasn't necessarily a new feeling, but when I look back, it was a little different. Like I was more tired than normal. Like I found myself taking naps during lunchtime, and I didn't always feel like I needed to take a nap for lunch, a little 30-minute power nap. I didn't feel like I needed to do that. But during that time I did. And even after I was retired from the military, like I did not have the type of energy that I normally would have. And so, you know, I kind of chucked that up as age, whatever the case may be. But after the ablation, the chest pains, I started noticing. At first, I would only notice them when I would work out. I would feel the chest pain when my heart rate was accelerated, when I was probably would be in like maybe a zone 2 or zone 3. Cardio wise, I would feel like a tightness of my chest. Not painful at that point, but definitely uncomfortable and definitely noticeable. And then as my heart rate would lower, it would go away. In the beginning, it would only last about maybe 10, 15 seconds tops. It would subside. I would move on with my workout, okay? But I did notice that like it was going from happening like maybe every other day, every so often, to like every day, okay? And so I'm pretty concerned about this now. I'm kind of like very much aware of it, very much like what's going on, okay? So my daughter's birthday is coming up, and so we decide that we're gonna go to Six Flags. And we go to Six Flags, we're walking throughout the park, and like I'm noticing like even when I would go up hills, like walk up hills, like my chest is like, it's tightening. And it goes from being uncomfortable to painful. And I'll never forget, there was a moment when we were in the park when we went up a hill, walked up a hill, and like I could not wait to get to the bench so I could sit down. And when I sat down, it was like I felt like I was about to vomit. And so I went to the bathroom and I was like, Lord, like something is not right. Like something is not right. Lord, help me, you know? And it subsided, but I was like, yeah, I definitely have to call my primary care doctor to make an appointment. So I'm making an appointment, but my appointment isn't for weeks away. And I'm thinking like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it to my appointment because it's bad. Like it's starting to even happen at rest. It's starting to wake me up it's starting to wake me up when I sleep. That's how much pain and the intensity is. And so one day I was driving to the store and I was having that chest pain. And I was like, Lord, I don't know if I'm gonna make it to my appointment. You know, like I don't know what to do. Should I go to the emergency room? Like, what should I do? Because I'm scared. And within 30 minutes of me saying that prayer to God, my primary care doctor calls me. And to my surprise, like, I mean, have your primary doctor ever just called you? But she called me and she said that, you know, hey, Rolanda, I'm touching bases with you because your appointment isn't for weeks away, but I wanted to touch bases with you to see what was going on. So I told her my symptoms and what was going on. And she was like, okay, I'm going to order you a stress test. And I want you to do the stress test, and we'll just go from there. So in that week, the stress test was ordered, and my appointment was that Friday for the stress test. And I went in. The crazy thing about life is sometimes you never in my mind did I ever go to like the worst case scenario in it. Like it never truly occurred to me how bad things were getting. Like, I don't know if that was like a protection for me not to stress about it or what, but I never thought that it was that bad, even with the intense pain that I was feeling. But so when I went to take the stress test, I'm like, you know, telling my husband like, hey, after the test, maybe we can go get lunch. You know, I'm planning. I'm in my mind, I'm like, okay, we're gonna take the stress test. We're gonna figure out what's going on, and I'm gonna go about my day. But when I went to take the stress test, I didn't even get through the stress test because of the pain and how my heart was responding to the test. I immediately went to the emergency room. And because I was on a military installation, they didn't have a cardiac section in the hospital. So I had to be medevaced to another hospital within the city. And so once we found a hospital, they found a bed, you know, it's a lot of waiting involved. I get to the hospital and I have to stay over the weekend because the cath lab to determine what was going on with my heart, that testing couldn't be done till that Monday. So everything happened on a Friday, and I had to stay over the weekend. And that weekend was some of the most intense pain that I have felt throughout the whole ordeal. Even with morphine, even with the pain meds that they was giving me, like it was not even really taking the edge off from the pain that I was feeling in my chest. And so from there, the symptoms started to increase when I was at the hospital. The pain in my chest, the tightness in the chest, the tightness in my jaw, sometimes feeling like I wanted to vomit. All of those symptoms I was experiencing at the hospital. So that Monday, when the scheduled cath lab to determine what was going on with my heart was scheduled, like I was more than ready to figure out what was going on with my heart. But even then, I wasn't thinking emergency open heart surgery. So when they sedate me and I go under anesthesia for the cath lab, and when I'm awoken to my surgeon telling me that I have two blocked arteries and that I was gonna have to have bypass, open heart bypass surgery to correct it, I was in disbelief. At the point of my surgery, my heart was operating at 10%. It's like, how do you go from serving 23 years in the Army and healthy, no issues, to having open heart surgery? Not even within a year from you retiring. I was in shock, right? So my husband, my mom, was there, and then, was telling my husband what was going on and the decisions that needed to be made. And my husband signed off on all the paperwork so that they can perform open heart surgery. And so, because everything happened so quickly, like you wake up from the cath lab to going almost immediately right back under for surgery, like you don't really have time to process anything, right? But I remember when I was getting ready to go back under, and I was laying on the table, couldn't really move, but my husband and mom came and they prayed for me. And it was this other lady that came in. I'm not sure what her role is. I just remember her voice. She was like, it's gonna be okay. And I was out. So when I woke back up, I had a tube in my throat, a breathing tube. I was hooked up to all these machines, and it felt like a whirlwind, like what just happened, right? It was traumatizing, to be honest. You go from being able to care for yourself to having to depend on everyone around you. So just the level of vulnerability, but just the level of vulnerability that you experience after going through something so difficult. It humbles you in ways that are beyond comprehension. The reality of how fast life can change, it changes your perspective on everything. You don't really leave a situation like this the same. But even in the midst of all of it, like when I came home from the hospital, I was so broken in many ways, right? Just from the shock of it. Like just a week before, I was able to take a shower by myself, and I come home and I need my husband's help, right? I can't even get out the bed without his help. And so, physically, emotionally, and my spirit was broken too. Like I had a lot of questions to God, like, how did this happen? Like, how did it get this bad without us figuring this out sooner? Like, why did it have to come to this? So in the midst of me, talking to God about all of these emotions that I'm feeling and being upset and angry, He allowed me that space and time to be in my feelings about what had happened. But once the dust started to settle, and I began to realize how even in the midst of this horrible situation, God covered me. Because what I think about, when my primary care doctor called me and she scheduled the stress test, that was God's grace. because I don't know if I would have made it to the emergency room, you know? Like, I don't know. But he knows me. He knows his child. And so he covered me. And so that stress test really provided the addressing of the situation that needed to be addressed, you know? God is so faithful. Even in the midst of suffering, God is still faithful, you know? It's like, the reality is, who chooses suffering? No one, right? Regardless of the degree, no one would choose suffering. And so I'm grateful that God spared my life, because as I noted in the beginning of the video, was heart disease is the leading cause of death for women in America. And oftentimes women's symptoms don't show up the way that men's symptoms show up. And so they get overlooked. And oftentimes the symptoms aren't caught in time. But I'm grateful that I had symptoms. I'm grateful that I was aware of those symptoms and that I took them seriously. And I'm grateful for God unctioning my primary care doctor to call me when she did. I'll never forget that moment. It's like I don't think I ever had God answer me in prayer that fast. Like, usually the answer for my prayers, it takes a little time, you know, but I prayed that prayer in the car, and within 30 minutes, like, my doctor called me, and I will just never forget that feeling of being seen by God in a way that was so pivotal in my walk with Christ. And even with just how he cared for me, with the surgeons that I had and the nurses that took care of me, just all the things, right? All the things. Like, God has truly been good to me, and I just thank him for putting up with me even after saving my life, right? I'm complaining that it had to get to that point, but the reality is that my life was saved and spared, and I'm still here to care for my children who are 14 and 12, and I get to be here and have another chance at life, you know? And so this channel will be documenting my journey, my healing journey, what that looks like of someone who has survived open heart surgery. My diagnosis was coronary artery disease. And so how I move forward from that, you know? Yeah, so that's my testimony. I hope that it can bring awareness to others. I hope that it can shed light to this disease that has taken over. So many people are affected by it. So many young people are affected by it. And I just want to do my part with bringing awareness. So thank you for listening to my video. I hope you consider subscribing. And I plan to document different parts of my life to show you how I am healing through this journey. Thank you. Bye.